And so legislation would be the next item on the agenda. And I think that Sheba Brown has indicated that she needs to leave in maybe 5 minutes. So I'll pull back up the slides. I hope you see them, of the National Broadband Act with some text. And I think that we can go pretty quickly through this long list of federal and state legislation, because much of it has essentially stalled because there are more pressing matters in both federal and state governments and local governments currently. So here we have HR 77520, the National Broadband Plan for the Future Act, and it was introduced a short while ago. It hasn't advanced, or even, I mean, I put the top bullet point entry in within the week, and so it's evident that progress is not being made, but it is being carried over to next year. If Sheba wants to talk, I'd welcome her input, but this information has. Go right.
Hi, I'm here.
Very good.
And I can pull up. Letting me unmute.
Okay, as I know that you are pressed for time, I thought we could just discuss the process by which these bills will be moving forward as
right.
Session. What is the calendar for the remaining portion of 2020, and what is the fate of bills generally that haven't been necessarily heard in an additional committee? Describe the process, if you don't mind, just an overview.
Well, so just the notes that I have in here from our ledge staff is that the bill was introduced in early July. It's co-sponsored by Representatives Mike Thompson, Benny Thompson, Representatives Case, and Representative Norton, and that Senator Ed Markey has introduced a companion bill in the Senate. So, I mean, he's been, and I guess in terms of that, broadband plan for the future, I mean, it's trying to analyze how the pandemic has changed the broadband needs, and also it's assessing progress in broadband development against an original plan that came through in 2008 in response to the financial crisis. So there's a lot of different pieces to it, but generally he's been supportive of addressing the digital divide in the context of COVID. So that's just kind of the background on that. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. And so the CARES Act is something that I put on this list, and it obviously has the opportunity to fulfill some broadband needs. There are challenges to, the county of Mendocino received a lump sum, and I don't know whether or not any uses that fall under these headings would necessarily be taken out of the lump sum that is given to each county, or whether additional funding can be secured through the CARES Act that goes above and beyond what has been distributed. So I think that Supervisor Williams and you might have input on that.
I don't. I would need to research that and run that up. I have to run that through DC.
Okay.
And do a little bit of digging on CARES. But in terms of like that specific question of like additional broadband funding outside of any lump sums that have already been dispersed, I would have to figure that out.
And the second slide in this slide deck on the CARES Act, which is on the screen, shows that HHS receives $180 million to support rural critical access hospitals, rural tribal health, telehealth programs. I think most people can read all of these things, and so I'll read every other one. It provides $3.1 billion to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. The Federal Communication receives $200 million for the COVID telehealth program, and I'll just more or less. I mean, my question is, are these additional potential grant applications that each county could be contemplating, or are these just approved uses for the funds that are being distributed?
I need to go back and get an answer for you on that one.
I'm sorry to ask questions. I mean,
I'm not sorry. I had the same question.
well, I mean, I had reached out and wanted, I mean, I hadn't asked this specific question, but look forward to the opportunity to further research along with your office. So don't mean to catch you by surprise on any single item. It's
no, that's fine.
You never know.
If that's something that I can, I'll call it a do out, and I have it noted here, so we can follow up on that for sure.
And as part of that follow up, if it's additional, if we could find out where that additional has been utilized, to give us a template of the types of projects, the scope, where applications have been successful, I think that would help us.
Very good. Anyone else have questions on that specific bill? Otherwise, I'll just scroll through and note that many of these bills have not come before an additional committee in as many as 4 months, which suggests that there are more pressing matters that these bills might resurface and strengthen. But for this year, it's my suggestion that they're stalled. And so here is the eBridge Act, and again, in the interest of time, I think I'll just leave the slide up for a short time. I can't add much more than there is in the summary, and it might be a better use of our time to move to the state legislation, because I think that participants of this meeting might have more input on those. So now we're, with that, it is 11:30.
I gotta run.
Appreciate it very much,
Thank
Chief.
you,
Thank you for participating. Thank the Congressman on our behalf. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
So again, I think that we can quickly review the legislation which has been circulated. This is SB 431, the Telecommunication Services Backup Electricity Supply Rules. And this one, it has been postponed by committee, and it will potentially be reintroduced in the coming year. And I should note that the CPUC is in a rulemaking process that is incorporating many of the rules that have become law in recent years with the help of Senator McGuire and Assembly Member Jim Wood. There are new rules with regard to backup power generation at tower sites, and those rules are being folded into the CPUC rule-making process. I mean, those laws are being formulated in the code of the California Public Utilities Commission. And while this bill might make alterations, I'm sure they're being contemplated by the California Public Utilities Commission as they revise their rules. There have been a couple of controversial bills that were seemingly in competition with one another. Both of the upcoming bills did not make it out of session, so their continued negotiations are ongoing with regard to AB 570 and SB 1130. I think that we probably have some members of this committee that would like to talk about them. They revise CASF funding models in general for those who haven't read them in detail. And so here you've been viewing 570. I'll now move to 1130 and open it up for comments or questions if anyone has questions about these two bills. I'm sure somebody has something to say.
I'll try to be politically correct.
Thank you. Go right ahead, please.
This is Mike Nichols from Sonoma County. We discussed this at great length during our Access Sonoma broadband meeting earlier this week. We were extremely disappointed in what developed during the closing session of the state legislature on the 31st. Quite frankly, there seems to be a tremendous acrimonious issue between both the Senate and the Assembly at the present time. And that was borne out in the closing minutes of the session when the governor's housing bill failed and when SB 1130 was basically given the deep six by the Assembly. It's truly a shame because this is something that the governor obviously had been looking forward to seeing passage on in fulfillment of his proclamation on broadband earlier last month. And neither house approved anything as far as broadband is concerned. It was troubling to me as a resident here in a rural area is that our representatives have been elected on the basis of broadband. They've talked about broadband during their campaign stumps. And yet when we get to the 11th hour, it appears that the incumbent companies have created a stalemate and neither of the bills moved forward. And that was my comment.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else have comments? I am scrolling through the governor's proclamation kind of erratically. Anyone have any other comments about the two bills most recently presented?
This is Tom West. Personal view. 1130 is essential to be passed. 570 is a dog.
Thank you for your input. I think that it's fair to say that there were problems with both bills, and
no, there were no problems with 1130.
So I could be mistaken. Everyone has their opinion. I'm not defending.
Basically, what we need is to start somewhere, and we didn't even have the opportunity to start anywhere, and that's unfortunate.
I agree with that. Obviously, this proclamation demonstrates the need that we all agree with and share with regard to build out, and not making progress in the state legislature is a failure. Being said, it's complicated, and there are lots of, like I said, I can't weigh in on one. I mean, I see the preference. I have my own personal preferences with regard to the legislation, but I will refrain from being overly political. Others can comment.
Without being political per se, what do people see as the reason for this? Is it uniquely the strength of the what do we call them? The people in AT&T and Comcast, and they have that much influence in our government?
Yes.
Amen.
They have that much money.
AT&T has more money invested in legislative issues than the oil industry in California.
Part of the other issue too is that when, like at the student level, at the county superintendent level, there are 34 counties that make up the small county caucus. 34 counties represent less than 1% of the student population. So for us to get a voice, even with our issues, it's very, very difficult. And there's only 58 counties, so 34 of them represent less than 1% of the student population. So that says something.